Hello guys, and welcome to my dual wield restoration staff Magicka Dragonknight build. This is a build that has a very powerful attack on the dual wield bar as an MDK, and it lets you hit crazy powerful whip combos with it. There you see the huge whip on that guy. So this is a really cool build. I've had a lot of fun playing it. It's different from what you'd normally see on an MDK, I think, because it's very mobile and very fast. And a big shout out to my good friend Mad Shadow Man for inspiring me to put this build together. Alright guys, let's take a look at the build. So to start off, we are a Dark Elf Dragonknight. I think Dark Elf is the best choice for this build because, well, it is a max damage build. We're trying to go for as much damage as possible. Dark Elf is great for a few reasons. Number one, we get the 9% max Magicka, which is really great for our damage. We get the 7% bonus to our flame damage, which is a large portion of our outgoing damage counts as flame damage. So Dark Elf is going to be great for that. And then finally, Dark Elf actually gives us a little bit of a max stam bonus. We don't have huge max stam on this, but part of this build is actually getting our light attack on our dual wield bar to deal some damage. So having a bit of max stam is going to play into that. So there you go. I think Dark Elf is uniquely the best option for a build like this. You can go with another Magicka focused option though if you want. So we're coming in at 31k max Magicka, definitely looking on the low side here. We are not using a damage shield outside of healing ward, so it's not important that we have a super huge max Magicka value here. We've got just about 23k HP here. Not bad at all. You know, for light armor, this is going to be pretty good. Honestly, 23 isn't so bad. As long as you're fast and as long as you are quick to your heals and we have healing ward, I don't know. I think this is actually okay for PvP, especially since we're running healing ward. It's going to work actually quite well. Our stamina is coming in at just under 15k. This is really nice. It's going to be great for our sprinting, our roll dodging, our blocking, and of course, having a larger pool here is going to up the amount of damage we do on our light attacks. A big part of this build is getting our light attack whip combo to do crazy amounts of damage, and playing into max stamina bit is going to help there. If we take a look at the regens on this build, they are fairly low. I'll buff up with the potion for you so you can see them buffed. 1540 Magicka recovery and then 918 stamina recovery. So not too crazy regens. We are running tripods on this build, so tripods is going to be great for the sustain. We are a Dragonknight and we have a pretty decent sized stam pool, so we can really take advantage of Battle Roar for sustain on this build as well. And then finally, the combustion passive is going to play into our sustain as well. So between all those things, we actually have pretty decent sustain. Like DK is the one class I think you can really get away with running low sustain on. Their passives just kind of make up for it. You don't have to run like active skills to increase your sustain. That being said though, we are running the restoration staff on the back bar, so the addition of the resto staff means that our sustain will be very, very good if we can pull a heavy attack off with it, and it gives us access to that major mending, so that's pretty sweet as well. Taking a look at our spell damage, I'll buff up for you guys so you can see it. 3,336 spell damage, and our weapon damage coming in at 2,470. This does not look super crazy, hey? But let's take into account this enchantment on our restoration staff here. This is not just an infused weapon spell damage enchant. This is a Torug's Pact infused weapon spell damage enchant. Almost 600 base weapon and spell damage from that enchant. So that means that our weapon and spell damage on this build are actually going to be a lot more than what it suggests here. Our spell damage is going to be coming in at over 4,100 fully buffed, which is super awesome. And our weapon damage is actually going to be coming in at over 3,300. So we actually have like a pretty beefy amount of weapon damage to pair with the 50k max stam. Now it's not anything super crazy, but like I said, we want to put as much damage out as possible on our dual wield bar. So having that 3.3k weapon damage on our dual wield bar is actually like pretty sweet for this build. Taking a look at the crit rates for the build too, we've got 45.8 spell crit and 37.2 weapon crit. So quite a bit of crit on this build as well, both the spell and weapon crit. And of course the weapon crit was invested into to make sure that our light attacks can crit as well. Taking a look at our physical and spell resistance on this build, not too shabby in all honesty. 22, almost 23k spell resist, and then our physical resist is coming in at 18k. Now I only have 1800 critical resistance. I am running one less piece of impenetrable than I should on this build, so ideally you'd have 2100 almost crit resist on this build instead of what I have here. Our penetration, our spell penetration is pretty sweet, coming in at almost 8,000. We are in light armor, so this is pretty standard light armor spell pen. Our physical penetration, however, is coming in at 2k, and we invested a little bit into that in our champion points, and we'll get to why we did that later. For the boon that we're using, we are using the Apprentice Mundus. This is going to be the best outgoing damage slash healing increaser for this build all around. Now, we are using Torx Pact, so if you actually want to invest more into damage and drop healing altogether, you could actually switch this this Mundus out for the Lover. The Lover is going to increase the amount of Torx Pact damage you do as well. The Lover is also going to increase the amount of physical damage you do with your light attacks as well. However, you do give up a lot of healing for that, so it's really up to you. I think the Apprentice is the best all-around choice here for damage and healing. However, the Lover is a great choice if you just want to go all damage. You can also go for you can also go for the Thief Mundus. The Thief Mundus is actually a good choice here because it's going to be good for your damage and your healing as well, and it's going to affect Torx Pact because your enchants can crit. So the Thief is kind of a unique choice in that it affects everything. However, the big downside of the Thief is that it is increasing your crit chance. So it makes you more crit reliant, and in PvP with a lot of people running crit resist, it's maybe not the best route to go unless you're heavily invested into crit damage, with it, which this build is not. So I think that the Apprentice is the best way to go here. That being said, though, you have a few options. We are a stage 4 vampire. This is very important for the build. We use Mist form. Speedy Mist is going to keep us from dying. You guys will see it in the gameplay. Speedy Mist, very OP. So you must be a vampire for that. And then for the food, we are using the Witch Mother's Potent Brew. This is going to be the best food for this build. You can use the gold alternative if you want. If you have the money for it, by all means, go ahead and use it. However, the cheap Witch Mother's Potent Brew is also a great option, giving you that max Magicka, max health, and Magicka recovery. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the gear that we're using on this build. So this is kind of the next variation, like I had said, of the previous Magicka Dragonknight that I had done yesterday. But this build we went in a different direction. But the gear that we wear on this build is actually going to be fairly similar to what we were running before. So to start off, we have the 2-piece Slime Craw to begin with. This is going to be great for the spell and the weapon crit, increasing both our crit chance. Is really great because of that light attack damage being based off of our weapon damage and stamina. And then Minor Berserk is also going to increase all of our outgoing damage as well with our stamina and our magical abilities. So Slime Craw is actually a really good helm set. Definitely best in slot for a build of this kind of style. The next set that we have is a 5-piece of Torx Pact. You guys have seen this on some of my builds in the past. This is a personal favorite set of mine just because of how much you can do with it, and we are using it for huge offensive potential on this build. So the 2, 3, 4-piece aren't too terribly impressive. It is nice to get that spell damage and the max HP though, but the spell resist it's kind of a bonus, but not something that we really need. I think physical resist would be better. That being said though, taking a look at our weapons, look at that enchant damage. 6,294 shock damage. And the big thing that Torx Pact does here is that it reduces the cooldown of these enchants. So these enchants are going to proc once every 1.5 seconds. Now, if you take a look at my swords here, we actually went Nirnhoned on the front sword instead of dual infused. And the reason for that is that this enchant will deal a little bit less damage. However, having infused on the back sword still reduces the cooldown of the front enchant as well. So it deals a little bit less damage. However, we get that that reduced cooldown, which is arguably the better part of this increased damage for our Torx Pact anyway. So the way that this works is we actually get a huge amount of damage coming from the Torx Pact enchant on our light attacks on the dual wield bar. And that's just one of the things that we're doing here to make our dual wield bar have a powerful light attack. And then something else I want to mention for Torx Pact is that it really buffs up our weapon spell damage on the back bar as well. Here you can see we have that almost 600 weapon spell damage bonus. This is going to double dip for both our physical and our magical damage, so that's super great. The next set that we have is a 5-piece of Shacklebreaker, and Shacklebreaker is also a really good choice for this build, and I think it is definitely a must-have for this style of build. So the reason we chose Shacklebreaker is because, number one, we are running the Swifty traits, and the max stat that Shackle gives is going to help make up for the max stat that we're losing from going Swifty traits, as well as running a set like Torx Pact, which doesn't give a lot of max stat either. Number two, Shacklebreaker actually gives us everything Magicka and stamina. And like I had mentioned earlier, we're aiming to have a powerful light attack on our dual wield bar on this build. So we actually have to build it in the gear as well. And this is how we do it. We get a little bit of weapon damage, a little bit of spell damage, a nice chunk of max Magicka and max stamina, and both recoveries from this set. It's going to play huge to increasing all our outgoing magical damage, as well as increasing our outgoing physical damage, and playing into our sustain. A really just fantastic all-around set, and it fits really well into this kind of dual-wield Magicka melee build that we've got going on here. For the traits on the gear, guys, like I had mentioned, we've gone infused with our restoration staff. Torx pack, for the most part, you're almost always going to run infused on a Torx pack build. That being said, though, I had mentioned that we'd gone Nirnhoned on the front bar. Nirnhoned, of course, is going to increase all of our outgoing weapon and spell damage on this build, so it's going to be great for both our physical and magical attacks. And then, like I had mentioned, having infused on the back bar means that we at least half the time get the more damage enchant, but all the time we get that reduced enchant cooldown, which is really just going to play into the outgoing damage that they deal. The reduced cooldown is that big part of that, meaning that we're going to get it on almost every single light attack that we use on our dual wield bar. The enchants on our Torx Pact are flame damage on the front one and shock damage on the back bar. You can do this however you want. I think I actually messed this up. Ideally, you want to go shock damage on the front bar and flame damage on the back bar. And the reason that I say that, or sorry, on your offhand sword. And the reason that I say that is because on a Dark Elf, the flame damage enchant is actually going to have a higher tooltip and deal more damage. So that means that we can put the maximum damage enchant on our back sword, so when that one goes off, we get the maximum enchant damage. And then on the front bar, going with the shock damage enchant means that you're often going to lead with your front bar enchant, and the shock damage enchant has a chance of applying minor vulnerability. So I think that that's a better combo. I think ideally you'll be dealing more damage if you reverse how I have the enchants here. That being said, I haven't gone and changed these, and well, I probably should. We'll see. If I keep playing this build for a long time, then I will definitely do that. For the traits on our necklace, I had mentioned it earlier, we are running 3 pieces of Swift. Don't mind my 1 piece of green Torx Pact ring. Please don't make fun of me, guys. Jack's very poor. Yeah, Swift is definitely a must-have for this build. A huge part of it is the mobility. We get a lot of survivability from just being fast in PvP, from being able to kite out players, from being able to turn a 10v1 into some back-to-back one-on-ones. That is how Swift is going to win us fights in PvP. And yeah, you really need 3 out of 3 Swift for this build, and upgrade this as much as you can. Get it to purple if you can. Gold is crazy expensive, maybe not worth it, but I would say at least go purple on these bad boys. Don't do what Jack's doing here and just have these really ghetto blue and green rings. For the enchants on here, we have full spell damage enchants. Very important to go for damage here. We get enough sustain out of the rest of our build that we don't need to go any sustain here, just full damage. And then for the gear, guys, we have 5 well-fitted and 2 impenetrable on at the moment. I would recommend doing 3 impen and 4 well-fitted. I think 1 extra piece of impen would be good for this build. That being said, it still performed really well in PvP. I didn't feel too terribly squishy on it, and I had a lot of healing power and a lot of mobility and a lot of sustain. So I was actually able to like do some pretty crazy fights on it. I don't know. I thought its ability to stay alive was quite good. And then finally, for the enchants on the gear, I would actually recommend that you do full max Magicka enchants. I have a few tri-stat enchants on here, and they're nice to kind of bulk up your health and your stam. That being said, though, I think the max Magicka would be a little bit more beneficial. If you want to go for the highest amount of damage and the highest amount of healing that this build can achieve, full max Magicka is going to be the way to go. But if you feel like you need a little bit more HP or a little bit more stam, you can throw some tri-stat glyphs on as you want. But I think the max Magicka is just going to be better overall for the build. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the skills that we're running. And we are going to start on that super lovely dual wield bar. Yeah, so here we go. Let's take a look at these abilities. This is going to be fun. Starting off with our first skill, we have got Flame Lash. And this is going to be your primary damage dealer, your primary stun. And also it's going to be a really powerful heal for you as well. This build takes advantage of our champion points to easily set opponents off balance with our roll dodge. We're running a lot of well fitted, so Flame Lash is going to be a great stun / heal, and outside of that, it's going to be a great spammable too. This is a very, very powerful, very cheap Magicka attack, and this paired with your light attack is huge amounts of damage. Fun fact, we're seeing the 10k tooltip on the Flame Lash here, which is pretty good for a Mag DK, but it's not anything crazy. If we were to look at our light attack on this build, it would be rocking like a 13 or 14k tooltip. So between the two, a light attack Flame Lash is like 24k damage. Kind of base tooltip. So that's just something to think about. This is a huge amount of damage paired with our very strong light attack. Now, the next ability we have is Empowering Chains, and this is actually becoming a very, very favorite skill of mine for the Dragonknight, and there's a few reasons for it. So this is going to be our primary gap closer. It is going to pull you to the enemy, dealing about 5k flame damage, and grant you 2 stacks of Empower that increase the damage that your next 2 light attacks deal by 40%. This is really going to play into our light attacks dealing big damage. So to put it in perspective, when I'm playing my Stamina Templar PvP build, and I hit just a regular mob with it, and I do a light attack, I can see up to a 10k crit on my light attacks on my Stamina Templar. Now, if I was to do a light attack on this build, a Magicka Dragonknight with the Empower from Chains, I can crit 7k with it. I kid you not, we have such a good light attack on this build. We get this 7k base crit, plus the Torag's Pact, plus the whip. I mean, huge amounts of damage coming off this combo. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention about Empowering Chains is that it's actually an undodgeable gap closer. It says at the bottom, this attack cannot be dodged or reflected. That means that you will successfully close the gap every time, and you will always hit them with this, always granting yourself that Empower buff. It also gives you access to Major Expedition, which is pretty sweet. That being said, though, we have a lot of Major Expedition on this build, so this is just one of the many sources of that buff. The next ability that we have is Volatile Armor. This is really nice for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's going to be access to our physical and spell resistance buff, which is just going to make us harder to kill. Super great for PvP. And then finally, it's going to release a huge AoE that deals just about 10k damage when we buff up here, so it's a pretty decent AoE actually. And then on top of it, that AoE has 10 meters of radius, a super fantastic stealth detect this ability is. You're gonna have such an easy time pulling people out of stealth that are even kind of close to you. It has so much range on the radius, and if you hit anyone with it, it'll pull them out of their stealth, so very, very nice for that. And then finally, while the armor is active, you return 1700 magic damage to an enemy that uses a direct damage attack on you. Not a huge amount of damage to return. However, this mixed with Mist Form is actually a great way to return more damage than an opponent deals to you while you're in your Mist Form. Alright, the next ability that we have is Flames of Oblivion, and this is actually a super fantastic skill for this build. Number 1, you get that fireball that will launch out every 5 seconds, dealing over 8k damage when we buff. This is just going to stack on top of all your other attacks to give you huge amounts of burst potential. I mean, in PvP, if you do a whip and you get the fireball and the light attack, you could easily hit a player for 20k damage with that full combo, and that's insane. That's no ultimate, just like one smack. Yeah, and I don't know what to say. Flames of Oblivion is a really, really good skill for any burst spec because it just adds a huge amount of extra burst on top of what you're already doing. Finally, while we have this slotted, it gives us Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, increasing both our weapon and spell crits by 10%. This is very important. Like I had said, we want to make sure we have enough crit for both our dual wield and our Magicka bar, so this will definitely play into that. The next ability that we're using is Coagulating Blood. This is going to be one of our 2 heals for this build. This is going to be our HP-based heal, and then the other heal we're running is the Healing Ward. So the 2 heals together actually work really well in conjunction, because you almost always want to go for the Healing Ward first. It's going to provide you that initial defense, allowing you to get that strong coag off, And then if the Coag wasn't successful enough, you can go back into another healing ward or whatever. Just the 2 heals in conjunction, honestly, they pair each other really well, and they give you a lot of burst healing on this build that I think it sorely needs, because the 2 together, honestly, having the healing ward shield and then being able to go for that secondary Coag, it just gives you a big cushion, you know, a big burst cushion that it's hard to get on a build like this, especially without a damage shield from our light armor line as well. And then finally, guys, for our ultimate, we are running Ferocious Leap, and you guys know why we have Ferocious Leap. It's going to be huge amounts, almost a 20k tooltip on this build, a little bit lower than the last spec, but not too terribly shabby. I hit a player for a 16k plus Ferocious Leap on this build just in my first day of playing it, so I'm sure that people can get higher than that if they find a squishier guy to hit with it. This deals huge amounts of damage. It's going to be a massive AoE knockback as well, so this is a great kind of group splitter, and then on top of it, you get a 51% of your max health damage shield for 6 seconds. This damage shield's really nice because it turns this very aggressive ult into a powerful defensive ult as well. And yeah, personal favorite DK ult of mine. Really great for this build because you do like a light attack Ferocious Leap, light attack whip, and not a lot of stuff surviving that. Seriously, this build hits way too hard. This should almost not be allowed. Anyway, taking a look at that Resto Staff bar, the first ability that we have is Igneous Weapons. We went with Igneous Weapons for the same reason that we had gone for the dual spell and weapon crit on the other bar. This is going to buff both our weapon and our spell damage by 20% for 36 seconds. So a really nice long duration buff to both our weapon and spell damage. On top of it, we are going to get the minor weapon damage buff as well due to this ability being a Earthen Heart skill. So we actually get a really nice amount of buffs, and that is it. It's just purely our long duration offensive buff skill. The next ability that we have is Race Against Time. This is great for a couple reasons. Number one, it's going to give us Minor Force, which is just going to increase all our outgoing damage. That 10% bonus crit damage is super great. And then number two, for 3 seconds, we get the Major Expedition, and we get 50% reduced sprint cost. That's a huge deal. This allows this Magicka build to sprint at very, very cheap cost. With Race Against Time plus Well Fitted, we are sprinting at like 70% reduced sprint cost. That is huge. That makes sprint so cheap. We can sprint a long time, and because we're running Swifty on this build, we are actually approaching speed cap during our sprint, so it makes us very, very mobile. This is going to be great access to like really fast mobility. You mix something like Race Against Time with perhaps Dragonfire Scale, and if you're taking a lot of damage, go for the Panacea, Race Against Time, and sprint away. This build can be very, very mobile thanks to this ability. And then the next ability we have is the king of mobility / defensive skills, Elusive Mist. So great on this build. This is going to add great mobility to your build. It gives you a very powerful counter to snares and immobilize by allowing you to just instantly break them and then giving you immunity to them while you're in mist. While you're in mist form, you also take 75% less damage. You can use the mist as kind of a damage cloak, so when a huge burst is coming in, you go into your mist form, take the damage, and then come out with a counter stun. Or with some counter damage of your own. So I don't know. I've really loved Mist Form on the Mag DK. I have been able to do some pretty crazy stuff with the Mist Form. I hope that you guys enjoy using it as much as I have. It has been a really good time. So yeah, also gives you Major Expedition for the 4 seconds. Really nice too. Just another access to that Major Expedition on this build. Alright, so for the heal on our Resto Staff, we've gone with Healing Ward. This is going to be your primary heal for the most part. When your health drops low, I think you most of the time want to go for Healing Ward first and then go for your Coagulating Blood. And what that's going to do is result in not only you getting a nice big damage shield from the Healing Ward, but then you get the nice big heal from Coag as well. So then you get almost full HP and the damage shield on top of it without having to run a max mag spec to get a pretty decent damage shield. Now, it's not a shield that you could viably have up all the time like that, but the big advantage of it is that when you need it, you're gonna have it, and that's really why I like Healing Ward paired with the Coagulating Blood. On top of this, Healing Ward gives us access to being able to heal an ally as well, so it adds a little bit of group synergy to this build. However, this is not a very group-focused build at all. The next ability that we have is Dragonfire Scale. I love the Reflect on DK. 6 seconds, we can reflect up to 4 projectiles. Super great. Increase the damage that we deal with a reflected projectile by up to 35%. You can one-shot people with their own attacks if you use this Reflect right. Now, the reason that I didn't choose the morph of this that gives you the snare immunity is because we are using Mist Form, and I couldn't really justify needing to choose that morph because we have so much snare immunity already through Mist Form. That being said, though, if you do want to run the snare immunity instead of the bonus damage on Reflect, you totally can. It's just kind of a more defensive choice for this ability. And then finally, guys, for the ultimate, we have gone with the Resto Ultimate Panacea. And ideally, I think you want to morph this to the Resto ult that gives you the Major Force buff, the Lights Champion. And Lights Champion is going to be the best buff for that. Major Protection, Major Force. Yeah, it's going to turn your defensive buff into not only a better kind of defensive heal, like a huge heal that this DK, honestly, I think really needs a really powerful heal like this, especially through the ultimate. It's really nice to have this really strong healing ult on the Dragonknight. But that major protection that it gives, 30% reduced incoming damage, is absolutely nuts. That's going to go crazy, crazy towards your survivability. And then that increased critical damage by 15% plus minor force, we get 25% increased crit damage if we have this up. So it kind of turns this into an even more powerful heal and gives it stronger offensive and defensive potential. Really, really good ultimate. For the most part, your ultimates on your DK are really awesome, and you'll be using your Resto ult defensively and your Leap offensively. That being said, the Ferocious Leap is still a really good defensive ult, just for that kind of huge stun property that it has. You can drop a huge stun and then mist out of there, and it can actually like break a lot of distance from players if you use it as a defensive stun in that way as well. Alright guys, so let's take a look at those champion points. We're going to start in the tower tree. So to begin, we've got 26 Warlord, 9 Sprinter, and 3 Bashing Focus. You got to break free, you got to sprint, and you got to bash in that order. So that's why I put my points like so. In the Lover tree, we've got 49 Arcanist and 43 Mooncalf and 37 in Tenacity. So a big focus on Tenacity here because we are running the Resto Staff. Resto Staff's going to return huge amounts of resource with the heavy attack. So putting into Tenacity is going to make that even better. Our regens aren't crazy high on this build, but we still want to invest into making them better. So we do have quite a few points in here as well, with the focus being on Magicka. In the Shadow Tree, we have got 51 Tumbling and 31 Shadow Ward. You got to block in PvP, and you got to dodge roll. This build needs to use both of them a lot, and that's why we put so many points into these guys. Dodge rolling, of course, being the more important of the two, because we have so much well fitted on. And the important passive we get in our green trees is the Wind Running passive. 2% bonus movement speed. It's not huge, but it's definitely going to go towards it. We are playing a max speed build, so getting more and more speed is not going to hurt us. And then finally, that 10% bonus Magicka recovery while sprinting is going to be really nice because we do sprint a lot, especially when we go into our race against time. It's just actually going to turn our sprint into kind of a beneficial resource return sprint more than a negative stamina sprint. And then finally, in the Apprentice tree, we've got 33 Spell Erosion, 32 Elemental Expert, and 28 Elfborn, and 7 in Blessed. Just a few points in Blessed here, because I did want to do a little bit more healing power on this build. Spell Erosion, Elemental Expert, Elfborn, great balance between these three, sorry. And that's, I think, ideal for this build. The important passive here is to get that 12% spell crit, definitely. In the Atronach tree, we have got 39 Physical Weapon Expert and 81 in Master at Arms. So huge focus on Master at Arms because a majority of our attacks are direct damage attacks, so they're going to get buffed by this. And then Physical Weapon Expert was actually chosen over Staff Expert to buff our light attacks on our dual wield bar. And yeah, I actually think this was a good call because we do want that Tactician passive, so we had to put a lot of points here. Our Resto attacks on this build honestly deal very little damage. We don't have very strong Resto heavy attacks, so going for the Physical Weapon Expert actually gives our physical weapons better light attacks than our Resto staff does, which is kind of funny because we're playing a mag build, but our light attack, like not including Torg's Pact, is already better on the physical weapons. So there you go. That is why we've gone there. The Butcher passive is not too terribly bad. That bonus damage against 25% HP is going to be kind of nice because we are not running an Execute on this build. And then, of course, the very important passive, like I had mentioned, is Tactician. When we use Roll Dodge, we set an opponent off balance if we dodge their attack. Very, very good. This is going to allow our Whip to stun people when we set them off balance. The synergy between this and Whip is really strong, especially if you're playing a good roll build. And yeah, been absolutely enjoying it, just absolutely destroying people with whip. Lots of fun, great passive for this build. In the ritual tree, we have got 21 piercing, 4 mighty, and 5 in precise strikes. Now, a little bit in mighty precise strikes for those front heavy points, and then 21 in piercing, because ultimately piercing is going to be the highest determiner of how much damage we deal with our light and heavy attacks with our dual wield bar. Now, I know damage shields aren't affected by penetration. That being said, though, I don't know. It's not like our light attack is dealing crazy damage anyway. A lot of the damage is coming from the Torx Pact, but I thought physical pen would be the best just to up it as much as we could against a majority of sources. The very important passive to get here is that perfect strike. You want to have that 12% weapon crit for this build, so you get that extra crit potential on your light attacks. In the red tree, looking at the steed, we have got 48 ironclad and 53 in resistant. Focus, of course, on ironclad resistant because we need to reduce the amount of damage we take from direct attacks. A majority of burst skills are direct attacks, and a majority of skills that hit hard are also going to crit. Lots of crits going around in PvP, so we want to run some crit resist to make sure that we don't take huge damage from those bad boys. In the lady tree, we have got 19 in hardy, 19 elemental defender, and 23 in thick skin. So nice even spread here with a little bit more focus, of course, on the damage over time aspect, as we don't have a purge on this build, so this is going to help. That being said, when it comes to dots on this build, healing ward plus mist form is a fantastic way to just tank out damage over time, and then you move away from whatever has just been dotting you really hard, and then re-engage with them with some burst combo. So I found that a purge is actually not really a necessity on this build. I didn't find myself getting into a situation on the limited playtime that I had where I felt I really needed it. That being said, you could definitely run purge on this build if you want. Totally up to you. And then finally, we have 39 points in light armor focus. This is going to really bulk up our physical resistance, and this is quite important because our physical resistance is like the one thing that we're really lacking on this build, is the physical damage reduction. So this is going to go a long way to making us just tankier against physical opponents. And then in the Lord tree, we have got 49 in quick recovery for that healing. That's right, all just for that healing. So quite a few points in the champion tree to kind of reflect the fact that our max stats are a little lower and we want more healing. There you go. Alright guys, so let's do some PvP commentary. I know you guys love to see it, so let's jump into it. Just a quick shout out before we start here. If you guys want to see me play live, you can always catch me live on Twitch. And yeah, let's jump into it. So as you can see, we engaged with a few DC on the dolmen there just to see who would follow us up here. So we're just doing that classic kind of kite game, using our speed here. There you see we fake going one direction, use the speed back around in this direction, and we're actually just going to drop down and just do a full loop around. And a big part of playing this build correctly is not trying to tank damage. A lot of times you see Magicka Dragonknights and they play very tanky builds where they're not very mobile and they're kind of like the tank the damage kind of build, etc. This is not like that. It's actually a very different style. You're going to be very focused on avoiding incoming damage altogether and then using your positioning to put some serious burst, just like you saw there, into a player who is maybe not as aware of where you are as they should be. So as you can see, we take that blue player down and we start putting some work into this DK here, and I know it's only a matter of time before more of the blues show up. And I see a couple coming up, so I go around the corner here to make sure I can yet again get behind these guys. And I get behind this guy and put some really nice damage into him with the whips there. Don't manage to capitalize on it, but come back around. He's set off balance from one of my rolls, and I get a really nice stun on him to finish him off there for a nice kill there. And these blues are going to work real hard to just keep rezzing the guys that go down, and that's okay. We're just going to focus on doing some work on these guys. Anyone they pick up is going to be low on resource, so we're just going to have to manage them. I have another player here who is also fighting with me, and he's doing a great job of just like tanking a lot of the focus. I can use my speed to just really rotate around these guys and not take a lot of focus, thanks to the fact that the other EP player here is going to soak it up. I come around this corner here, just breaking some line of sight sight, go for a quick resto heavy attack, do another one on the blue player here, but then decide that I need to go in. This guy's about to die. Take advantage of the opportunity there, get a good stun off on the tanky player, and then turn around with the other player here and actually put huge damage into the player behind us, managed to bring him down, and then we are left to fight this last tank here as he tried to res all his friends, but nope. Now they're all dead. It's just you, and we're going to take you down too. Great fight to those DC, and there you go. I think that was a great clip just showcasing a mix of the movement speed as well as just the battle style that this build kind of plays. Now I know what you guys want to see. I advertise this build as being high damage, right? You guys want to see that. Here we go. Let's see what kind of havoc we can cause in an environment where we can just deal huge damage to people. 2 really fast kills on the players on Siege there. Just really utilizing and showing off that damage and the speed on this build. Huge, nice whip stun on that guy into the leap. He takes a ton of healing from some other players, so we actually don't manage to get the kill on him there. And now that we have a lot of focus, we decide, okay, we go into the wings, into mist. We're going to retreat here a little bit and try to break some distance. So I do a quick fake around one of the corners there and then decide to come back up the stairs. A big part of using especially your Swifty movement trait is to be really conscientious of like what your movements look like to your opponent. There you see a nice little play there to get back down on the chains, but I end up deciding to pull back out because I don't want to pull too much blue focus as they are getting in the keep now. But there you go. Just something that I wanted to talk about is when you use your mist form, you're very fast and it hides the thing over your head. So if you can fake going in a direction and then quickly change directions when someone can't see you and go the other way, you can really throw people off guard with your mist form. Here you see I'm taking quite a bit of pressure from the blue players here. I put some nice damage into this Nightblade. Unfortunately, he retaliates with his ultimate. I take the really strong stun from him and decide that I need to back it up and just retreat a little bit. I'm very heavily defiled from these players here, so I've been taking some snipes, etc. as well. Very low on resource here, and I just do some really trolly heavy attack on the Nightblade and just keep kiting him around here. Get a wings off into the heavy attack to make sure I reflect any ranged attacks, and I managed to finish the heavy attack before the one Nightblade's ambush comes down on me. And then same deal here. We're very low on Magicka, and all I'm going to do is just use my mobility to kite these guys out. It's tough to get a heavy attack off on Nightblades like this because they are like burst-oriented specs, so you're better off just kind of waiting like that for the ultimate. Wait for your moment to just turn on them and then hit them with some serious burst. And as you can see there, the kite game ended off paying out. We wait for the ultimate, get the big resource return, get a kill on one Nightblade there. And now we're going to move back into the keep here. Aggro is right behind me too, my friend. And we're going to try to do our best to prevent blue from taking this keep. Just a quick recharge. Yeah, something I do want to note is that because you're using Torag's Pact, expect to recharge your enchantments all the time. All the time. So here you can see there's a blue player here. Just get a really fast kill on that guy. Huge leap into this guy here. Get him with some really nice whip damage to take him down. Put some pressure into this other player here, but she's actually super tanky in her block. I decide that it's not in my best interest to blow my Magicka attacking her block. We'll wait till maybe we get the opportunity when she has her block down. We put a bit of pressure into this guy here. Really nice chain into him from behind. Not taking a lot of aggro from the other players here. I decided to do a quick target change into the squishier player there. Get a really nice stun off on him with the whip. Follow it up with another whip just to finish him. And there you see a huge leap into the whip. Oh my gosh. The damage on this build, we just wreak so much havoc with this huge damage combo on it. This guy here, we just pound him with some whips as he tries to run away, and he doesn't even heal or anything. He honestly just goes right down to the whips. And here we are again, using the terrain, moving around, making sure that when we attack these guys, we get the drop on them. And now comes the tricky part. These guys are going to start rezzing like crazy, and this becomes very hard to deal with. There you see 3 bashes on 3 separate players there. And I'm going to have to really watch it for the reses here. I get a really nice interrupt on her there, into the leap, into the whip. Huge combo to take her down. And right back to it, these guys. Right back to the reses. Get a nice interrupt on him there. Fun fact, the interrupt sets the opponent off balance. So you can follow your interrupt with the whip that stuns them. And it will stun them after the interrupt as well. There you see I'm very, very low on stamina. I'm not going to be able to keep interrupting these guys until my next ult comes down. Thank God another EP player comes comes in and he actually gets a bash off. So we do manage to prevent some of the reses there. But it was all for naught. Honestly, had we been able to prevent the reses, I think we could have potentially won this fight. But as you see here, the keep just flipped, and a lot of these guys respawn. A couple of them do manage to get resed as well while I have my back turned. And now we're in a situation where everything that we've worked so hard for has just blown up in our face, and we get to deal with NPCs as well. So the first thing that me and the remaining EP player here are going to do is retreat. I go into my resto ult because I have literally no resources. Pull some heavy attacks here. We've got to try to get as much as we can because there you see the big train from these guys. Now I go this way, and the other EP player splits the other direction. And he actually gets a majority of them to follow him, and I only have one player follow me down here. And as you can see, he comes around this corner, and we hit him with some attack. And here's the EP player. He literally did a full loop around. Werewolf sprint so strong. And there you really get to see the really powerful speed builds and how great they are for like open world PvP. The fact that we're both on speed builds here is probably the reason that we're both still alive. Honestly, we've got to have the speed in order to fight the larger numbers like this. You can't just tank this out. And here you see they're going to trickle in just a few at a time, get a really nice whip stun off on that guy after dodging the attack. Go into a bit of mist here. This guy just spams his AoE. Yeah, we're just going to whip him down a couple times with the werewolf. This other player takes a brutal stun from the wolf, and I hit him with a couple whips. This other player comes up. We go into the leap, into the whips. Oh my gosh. The damage on this build is so disgusting. I don't even know what to say. We're just tearing through these poor guys, and they're just trickling in here. They're not coming as a group, and if they trickle in like this, we're just going to nuke them one at a time. Oh my gosh, it's too much damage. These guys can't expect this to work. But as you can see here, they're just hitting that respawn button. We got more and more DC coming in here as we continue this fight. I do a little bit of kiting around the corner there, go into a whip on this guy and commit to a few attacks, take a bad stun there. And as you can see here, I go for the first healing ward, a dodge roll, and the curse explodes, killing me. Maybe if we hadn't been so aggressive there, we could have survived, but we made the aggressive choice, and it ended up costing us. As you can see there, we got piled on really hard. So there you go. For the last clip on this build, guys, I have a little bit of Zerg kiting and a little bit of some burst. That guy had like 30k HP. We just tear him down with the whips. Oh my gosh, it's just so much damage. Like a light attack whip combo, if it crits hard, can hit a player for like 15k. That's so nuts. That's so much damage. Anyway, so there you can see that. Another DC player comes here. I decide to leave him alone because he's kind of low level and just go try to see what I can pick at the side of the Zerg here. But once I turn around, I notice he's actually rezzing the guy I just killed. No, no, no. Can't be having any of that. No rezzing. What are you doing? This guy just gets right back on the siege. He doesn't even like heal or anything. So we just kill him again. And lo and behold, we've got another DC player here. Use the chain gap closer to stay on top of him while he's on his horse there. And I just quickly turn around because I know that he's got a lot of DC players and I don't want to pull too many at a time. The whole point of this is to pull kind of like a portion of the Zerg as opposed to the whole thing. So we're just doing a little bit of pokes here with the resto staff, heavy attacks. Here we see we get a little bit of attention. Hold block for a sec, go for a roll into the mist. And that, I think, is appropriate. We've got some guys coming up here. A little bit of an awkward roll there. Kind of went in the wrong direction, but it's okay. We ended up just misting back out anyway. And we quickly come behind this tree just to break a little bit of line of sight, and a majority of the Zerg goes up this way chasing another EP player, and I managed to break them again and get a little bit of a split here. We got a couple players jump down, huge leap. There you see that guy just gets crushed by the leap alone. Put the whips into this guy to finish him off as well. Make sure we keep our buffs up, and then put a little bit of pepper into this guy here too. And get a good stun off on him there with one of our whips. But we unfortunately take another stun from another DC player that comes. And I tried to do a wings resto heavy attack on him, but I don't commit to it because I notice huge amounts of damage coming from the top there as the DC players have kind of turned around and come back towards here. I luckily managed to get into my resto ult. There you see that kind of like clutch sustain. This build has really good sustain, but a big part of it is getting a good feel for your potion and your resto ult cooldown. And we do manage to escape, and just when I think I'm home free, I come out of this mist not holding block, Big mistake. I take a bolt stun and die. Should have held block, should have gone for a roll. Maybe we could have survived. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. And finally, we are sponsored by What the Fast. They are a VPN for gamers. They give me 50 better ping on average to ESO. So if you guys want to try out a VPN, they are free to try in the link in the description below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Big build video here. So I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night, everybody.